Hello, and welcome to Inside Out, brought to you by Countryside Mobility, an initiative which, just like this podcast, is all about helping people to access the great outdoors. Join me as we travel to the southern tip of the Cotswolds and discover a small slice of America. Travel east to discover how groundbreaking research is opening up the countryside, and find out more about how the charity behind Countryside Mobility is transforming lives. So grab your boots and join me for episode 2 as we step outdoors. Now, although Countryside Mobility is primarily based in the southwest of England, I thought, well, this is episode 2, so it's time to stretch our legs a bit. I thought we'd head east, to Suffolk in fact, and speak to a good friend of mine, David Falk, who just happens to be Green Access Manager there. So welcome, David.
Hello, how are you, Neil?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you, David? How's Suffolk?
Suffolk today, it's gorgeous. It's the blue sky, the sun's out, it's warm outside. From the environment of my garden, because that's about as far as I can go, it looks lovely.
Give us a sense of whereabouts in Suffolk you are. It's a fairly big county, so just paint a picture for us of whereabouts in the county you are.
Okay, so Suffolk is quite an interesting county. You've got sort of 3 zones to it, and I'm in the eastern zone. So the eastern side of Suffolk is the coastal strip and a little bit of hinterland, and then there's the market town or the county town of Ipswich, and I live just 6 miles south of Ipswich itself. Then as you go west from me, the middle part of the county is sort of a landscape, a rolling, sort of gentle landscape with some really ancient medieval villages and towns, some fascinating sort of old churches. And then the far west of the county is an area that's called the Brecks, and you get into a landscape of vast forests of pine trees and sandy soils and heathlands. So it's quite a diverse county in terms of landscape.
Brilliant. You've sold it to me, although I have to say I already have a very soft spot for Suffolk. My grandparents lived there, so I used to spend my childhood holidays in Suffolk, and of course we first met in Suffolk when we both worked at the East of England Tourist Board.
I know, all those years ago, Neil. You were there in the early 2000s, was it?
Late 90s to early 2000s, before I headed to Central Asia, but that's another conversation. Inside Out's not going quite that far east.
Yes.
Anyway, tell us about your current role. Green Access Manager, is it?
Yeah. So it's Green Access Manager. It's an interesting title. And my job is to look at opportunities to improve access. So that might be building a brand new footpath, a brand new bridleway, or it might be taking an existing right of way and making it better so people can use it more easily. And then the promotion side is working with a lot of villages and community groups to create walking guides and cycle guides. And then every year, albeit not this year because of the coronavirus, but every year we put on the Suffolk Walking Festival, which is quite a big event that we do as well. So, then I do a lot of work with media and people like that to promote Suffolk as an easily accessible destination for walking, for cycling, for horse riding. So yeah, it's interesting. It gets me out and about a lot, which is good.
I want to hear more about that in a moment. But I guess the thought that comes to mind immediately is that Suffolk is a very rural county. I think that's what most people's perceptions would be. So yeah. I guess you would think, well, there's not that much to do in the sense of helping people to access the countryside. But are there barriers that stop people from making the most of it?
This is a really interesting one because in this job, I go out myself and enjoy the countryside in my way. And it's very easy to then extrapolate that experience onto everyone else and think, well, if I do that, why doesn't everyone else do that? So to help me in my job, I've worked closely in the last 5-6 years now with University of East Anglia. And we're looking at what those barriers to countryside access have been. So what stops people going for a walk or a cycle ride in the countryside? And there's loads of barriers. And what's interesting is that sometimes those barriers are not physical, they're psychological. It's the psychological fear of getting lost, the psychological fear of trespass, even the fear of not knowing, excuse me, if you enter a field, if there's wild stock, if there's animals in the field, horses, or if there's cattle, and the fear of danger and that sort of thing. And those things can really play on people and prevent them from really exploring the wider countryside. So my challenge is then to try and show places that you can go where you'll still find the car park, the toilet, and the tea room. So very often with the walk leaflets I produce, we base them from a pub because the pub offers all of those facilities.
Very good. And does that mean that you have to test out the pubs, David?
Well, yes, of course, because well, I mean, there's two benefits there. One is that you're promoting a walk where there's easy parking and refreshments and stuff, but B, you're promoting the local business, which is good. But yes, invariably, in scoping out these leaflets, I will often, obviously go to the tea room, go to the pub and explore those. But it's really good because then you get chatting to people. And I don't just go in and have a drink. I mean, I go in and talk to the landlord or talk to the cafe owner. And there's a real joy, actually. There's a real thrill working with communities on developing these leaflets and promoting the local businesses. You meet the most amazing characters and interesting people doing it, which is really fun. But that's the challenge is, going out. You think, oh, it's easy, just go out for a walk. But actually, there's a lot of reasons why people don't.
So are there particular groups that you would say you're wanting to particularly encourage into the countryside more, that you're working with initiatives to do that?
A lot of my work is about targeting more disadvantaged groups who perhaps don't traditionally go into the countryside, whether it's because of ill health or some social reason, or perhaps a sort of a gender, not gender, but an age reason. So, for example, people sort of our generation and older are very used to going into the countryside because we did it when we were young, and young kids today don't access the countryside as we did. They, so much. I think people play a lot safer these days. So they're not used to going to the countryside. So working with school groups and community groups, we're trying to sort of open up the countryside to those people.
Yeah, I guess one of the hopes of silver lining at the moment, when opportunities for leisure are more restricted, that one thing that I think I've seen when I've been walking very locally is that there are lots of families out walking at the moment, perhaps who wouldn't have done that in the past, and hopefully that will be something that they'll have been introduced during this time and want to continue on from that.
You're right. When I've gone for walks around the village, there's lots of people out and about walking. I'm forever passing people by, and everyone's moving out your way. It's all very courteous and very nicely done. Yeah, people are really exploring, and I think that's really good. That's really good that the people are discovering, the footpath networks on their doorstep and discovering what's around them.
Absolutely, yes. No, I've certainly discovered one or two myself, and I think lots of people are discovering those footpaths which are local to them and realising they don't have to necessarily travel, in a car for half an hour, and they can find something on their doorstep.
Yeah, and I don't know, like probably similar to where you are. There's on your doorstep there is the most amazing history. I mean, Suffolk's full of, as I said before, medieval history because we were occupied by Anglo-Saxons, and there's lots of very ancient villages here. And that results in very ancient buildings and very ancient churches. And just where I live, you can do a short walk, and in that walk, you go past a medieval church. There's an old red barn that was built in Henry VIII's time. There's a moated farmhouse that looks like something from a sort of a storybook or something. There's a mock castle, and there's these cottages that look like Hansel and Gretel cottages. This is just this most amazing history. And I've actually worked out, this is a funny sort of effect of the shutdown, as it were. But by doing local walks, I've suddenly realised I can do a really good little short 3 pub crawl in my village that I didn't realise I'd never sort of linked together.
Very nice.
Which is really, and it made me think, the next time we have friends or family over, rather than getting in the car and driving to a destination, and we'll have morning coffee in one, lunch in the other, and afternoon tea in the third. And it'd be really fun.
Well, I'll have to plan my next visit to you, David, to test that out.
Do that. Well, we could test it. See if it works. Be perfect.
Very good. Well, I guess the final thing I wanted to ask you is really what you enjoy most about your job. It sounds like you have lots of fun.
Well, what do I enjoy? I really enjoy meeting people. That's absolutely fascinating, and exploring the counties and that. And the walking festival I do is a joy. It's every year when we do the festival, albeit we won't be doing it this year, but every other year when we've done the festival, it's a real joy in May to meet all the walkers again, and we're like a big family. So there's a real joy in doing that. So yeah, there's lots of different interests there. There's not necessarily one best thing, but there's lots of different bits to the job which are really fascinating and interesting.
Well, thank you again to David, and thank you to you, any returning listeners who tuned in to episode 1. It's been great to see people listening from around the country and even Perth, Australia. Please do help spread the word. Probably the easiest thing is to direct people to our website, which is insideoutpod.com. That's insideoutpod.com. And there you'll find links to all the different places where you can listen, and it has its own player there if that's easier. I'm pleased to say that we're now registered with most of the main podcasting services, so if that's the easiest place for you, then do search there for Inside Out Countryside. You should then find us. Don't forget to subscribe and to leave a rating or review. Now, as you may be aware, Inside Out is brought to you by Countryside Mobility, which is an initiative of the charity Living Options Devon. I thought it might be useful to find out a bit more about the work of the charity and how Countryside Mobility fits into that. So I got in touch with the Chair of Trustees, Andrew Barge, and I started by asking him how the charity first came into being.
This year, actually, Neil, is our 30th anniversary. So if you do the maths, that was the charity was founded in 1990 by Peter, who is now the deputy chairman. The aim of Living Options is to improve the outcomes for people with disabilities and the deaf community as well. So we're very much about accessibility, whether that's accessibility to services, to opportunities, or literally just accessibility to the outside world as well, and lead in a fruitful role in society in terms of employment and just enjoying the opportunities that life brings to people.
And I know from my work with Living Options that there's a huge variety of different projects which we haven't got time to do justice to. I really would suggest people have a look at the website and see the breadth of different work there. But I guess one thing I'd wanted to touch on really was some of the unique and distinctive way in which Living Options work. I know that it really puts the users of the services at the heart of it. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so the ethos of Living Options is that in terms of our structure, we aim to have about 80% of the trustees with lived experience of a disability. I think 70% of our volunteers and a third of our staff have disabilities or are deaf. So we are very much a lived experience organisation, if you like, and we involve those people, volunteers and service users, greatly in terms of the development of our work.
And obviously this program is particularly focused on the countryside and countryside mobility. How does that particular project fit into the charity?
Well, as I said earlier on, we are very much about accessibility. The Countryside Mobility Project is a fantastic project in terms of allowing people with physical disabilities who may not be able to get out and about. I know from my own experience how wonderful that can be in terms of just lifting your spirit and improving your mental health, and of course, obviously, improving your physical well-being as well.
Yes, I do remember. I remember you having a go on one of the trampers once.
I did, yes. I did at Castle Drogo, indeed, the beautiful Castle Drogo, and I went out and used one of the trampers, and it did really sort of open up a part of that estate that I wouldn't have been able to access myself with my own physical disability. I would have just looked at it from a distance, but not been able to get up close, if you like, to some of those beautiful sights and trees and shrubs and things like that, as I say, an able-bodied person would be able to do.
Brilliant. Well, thank you ever so much for giving us that insight, Andrew. It's been really helpful to provide a bit more context behind countryside mobility. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Okay, thank you, Neil.
Now, in our last episode, we enjoyed a little interlude thanks to a field recording of a dawn chorus. We're going to hear birdsong again, but this time in a musical setting, as we listen to a perennial favourite, Spring, from Vivaldi's Four Seasons. Now, one of the joys of the British countryside is that you never quite know what's around the corner. If you're visiting the Georgian city of Bath or the rolling hills of the southern Cotswolds, then you might be a little bit surprised to stumble across a small piece of America. One of our most recent partners is the American Museum and Gardens, and I recently spoke to John Ducker, head of visitor experience, and asked him how this Anglo-American combination came into being.
We're the only museum of kind of Americana outside of the US. The museum was founded by they were kind of antique dealers, collectors, and they wanted somewhere to showcase their own collections, but also describe to people in Britain that America was much more than cowboy films and Hollywood. And it had its own history and how that was intrinsically linked to Britain. So they set the museum up in 1961. They found Claverton Manor in 1958. So in that very short space of time, they shipped across many, many things from America, including interiors of houses which were being demolished. And then they kind of retrofitted Claverton Manor with all these period rooms. So there's a tavern, there's somebody's living room, there's a very fancy parlour. But then they also see a kind of horticultural history outside in our recreation Mount Vernon garden and in the kind of new contemporary modern American gardening in our new American garden.
It's a fantastic location there at Claverton Manor. Do you want to describe a little bit about the setting there?
We're in Bath, but not in Bath. We like to be the kind of hidden gem. Hopefully not too hidden though. So we're just on the rise of the Limpley Stoke Valley. So we're just skirting an area of outstanding natural beauty, just below the University of Bath. And so Claverton Manor is built in about 1820. And it's a really wonderful location because it's got these amazing views, but really simple access to Bath and via the A36 towards Warminster, Salisbury, that sort of way.
Great, and you've really been investing in the garden element of the attraction, haven't you?
Yeah, since the museum was founded in 1961, the gardens have always been quite an important feature of trying to tell the history and the social history of America. But in 2018, we launched the new American garden and a refreshed Mount Vernon garden after quite a major fundraising campaign, predominantly in the US, but some money from some generous friends here in the UK. And we worked with a Washington, DC based firm called OM Van Sweden. And that is their first UK commission. And they created this wonderful kind of sweeping path, really interesting planting schemes. And at the same time, our head gardener was refreshing the Mount Vernon garden based on new archaeological evidence from the actual Mount Vernon garden. And he went over there and he came back with some amazing ideas. So we've got these wonderfully refreshed gardens which sit just next to some quintessential kind of English parkland. So that the kind of that juxtaposition is really nice. So you've got really formal beds, historically based plantings, but then just space to kind of walk your dog and relax and just hide away.
That's great, and one of the really good things is that over the last year that you've had an all-terrain mobility scooter, a tramper, available for people to hire to be able to access those if they would normally find walking difficult. How's that gone down?
Because we are on the side of a hill, some of our terrain is a little bit challenging at times, but the tramper just gives that extra bit of freedom. And certainly our staff and our volunteers have really embraced the idea, and they're now champions for the tramper. And they really get so excited when somebody books the tramper on the telephone or just sees it just outside the ticket office and says, I want to use that if I can.
And presumably, like all attractions, you're changing what's available during the seasons, both outdoors and inside.
That's right. So each year we have a number of special exhibitions. Some of them we create ourselves from our extensive catalogue of objects. Some we loan in, we bring in from this year, the Fashion and Textiles Museum. We've also had Titanic, Marilyn Monroe, all manner of great things. Also in the garden as well, the planting kind of reflects that seasonality. So right now, daffodils, of course, as you'd expect, towards late May, June. Alliums, I mean, I'm 6'2" and you're quite tall, Neil. Alliums are as tall as us. And then, of course, you get the various kind of vegetable seasonal planting in the Mount Vernon garden as well. So throughout the year, a real kind of colourful palette of things both inside and outside to see.
Great, and I would really endorse that. It's a fantastic place to go. I'd not heard of it or been there until we started working with you, and I can really say from the 2 visits that I've made, it's a great place to go to. And thank you very much for joining us, John, to tell us a bit more about it.
Thanks, Neil. It's been a pleasure, and hope to see lots of Tramper users and, of course, lots of visitors throughout the year.
Well, that's all we have time for in this episode, but don't forget to keep spreading the word. Join me next time as we find out more about what Lonely Planet describes as walking at its most diverse, spectacular, and delicious. Do subscribe, rate or review the podcast, get in touch via the Countryside Mobility Facebook or Twitter pages, or visit countrysidemobility.org. Until next time, stay safe and keep well.